The council chamber stretched wide and tall like a cathedral built for giants. 7 species sat in their designated sections, each area designed for their unique biology. The Vaxans occupied the eastern wing with their scaled bodies, reflecting the station's artificial light. The Zenthari buzzed quietly in their hive cluster formation to the north. 5 other species filled the remaining spaces, all of them ancient civilizations who had traveled the stars for thousands of years. Daniel Brooks stood at the human podium, small compared to most delegates present. He wore the simple gray uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps with its single blue stripe, indicating his rank as liaison officer. His dark hair was cut military short, and his brown eyes scanned the room with careful attention. He had been on Harmony Prime Station for only 3 weeks, still learning the complex politics of galactic society. Today was his first major council session, and he could feel the weight of Earth's reputation resting on his shoulders. Ambassador Krelix rose from the Vaxon section. His species stood nearly 8 feet tall with muscular frames covered in deep green scales. His yellow eyes gleamed with confidence as he addressed the assembly. The Vaxan's voice rumbled through the translation devices everyone wore. He spoke about territory and expansion, about the natural order of strong species guiding weaker ones. His words were wrapped in diplomatic language, but the message was clear. The Vaxan Empire wanted to expand into the buffer zone between their space and human colonies. High Chancellor Vorn clicked his mandibles together in the Zenthari gesture for recognition. The insectoid leader stood on 4 legs with 2 others folded across his thorax. His compound eyes reflected rainbow patterns as he turned his head toward Krelix. He asked about the species currently inhabiting the buffer zone, about their rights and the Council's obligation to protect smaller civilizations. His voice carried the buzzing undertone common to his kind. Krelix waved one clawed hand dismissively. He argued that humanity was too new to space travel, too primitive to hold valuable territory. He mentioned that humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 4 decades ago. He suggested that Earth should be grateful the Vaxans were offering protection at all. He proposed that 3 human colony worlds should be ceded to Vaxan control as a gesture of goodwill and recognition of the natural hierarchy. His final statement dripped with contempt. He called Earth's military barely capable of defending a single star system, and humans themselves a species of barely civilized apes who had no business claiming multiple worlds. The council chamber filled with various sounds. Some species chittered in what might have been amusement. Others remained silent, watching to see how the human would respond. Daniel felt anger rising in his chest but kept his face neutral. He had been warned about Vaxan arrogance during his briefing. Earth's diplomatic training emphasized calm responses and measured words. He took a slow breath and stepped forward to the speaking platform. His voice came out steady and cold. He thanked the ambassador for his candor. He noted that honesty, even when insulting, was preferable to hidden intentions. He addressed the council as a whole, explaining that humanity had no interest in the Vaxon's proposed arrangement. Then he turned to face Krelix directly. His next words would be remembered across the galaxy for decades to come. He told the ambassador with all due respect that he did not want Earth's attention. He suggested that the Vaxan Empire should walk away from human borders and everyone could remain friends. The chamber erupted. Several species made sounds that the translators identified as laughter. The Vaxan delegation stood as one, their scales bristling with indignation. Krelix's eyes narrowed to slits. He demanded to know what threat a species of primitives could possibly pose to an empire spanning 200 star systems. He asked what weapons Earth possessed that could frighten civilizations who had mastered space travel while humans still lived in caves. His voice rose with each question, filling the chamber with contemptuous challenge. Daniel remained calm. He began speaking in the measured tone of someone explaining basic facts. He told them about Earth, about the planet where humans evolved. He described a world where almost everything was designed to kill them. He talked about predators and diseases, about weather patterns that could wipe out entire regions, about the constant struggle for resources. He explained that humans were persistence hunters who could track prey for days without stopping. He mentioned that human endurance was unusual among sentient species, that they could run until their prey simply collapsed from exhaustion. Then he moved to human history. He spoke of 10,000 years of warfare. He mentioned conflicts over territory, resources, religion, and ideology. He described weapons development that accelerated with each generation. He told them about the world wars, about industrial-scale killing that claimed tens of millions of lives. He explained about nuclear weapons, about the moment when humans created devices capable of destroying their own planet multiple times over. He noted that all of this happened before humanity ever left Earth's surface. His voice dropped lower. He told them that humans had turned their most destructive impulses into tools. He said that every tactical doctrine in Earth's military was written in human blood, learned from fighting themselves. He explained that humans unified their governments not because they became peaceful, but because they became efficient enough at killing each other that continued conflict meant extinction. He said that humanity chose to direct their violent nature outward, into protecting what they built rather than destroying it. The laughter had stopped. Several delegates shifted in their seats. High Chancellor Vorn leaned forward with his antennae twitching in obvious interest. Other species whispered among themselves through their various communication methods. But Krelliix stood unmoved. He declared it all bluffing. He said that tales of past violence meant nothing against modern military technology. He announced that the Vaxan Empire would conduct military exercises near human colonies within the week. He stated it was their right as a superior civilization. Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. He recognized the feeling from Earth's history lessons, from the moments before wars began when diplomacy failed and pride overruled wisdom. He tried one more time. He told Krelliix plainly that this was a mistake. He warned that provoking humanity would reveal capabilities Earth had preferred to keep quiet. He said that being underestimated was often an advantage, and the Vaxans were about to remove that advantage. The Vaxan ambassador laughed. He called Daniel's warnings the desperate threats of a weak species. The session ended with formal votes that meant nothing. The council's bureaucracy moved slowly, while the Vaxan military moved fast. Daniel walked back to his quarters feeling the weight of failure. He sat at his desk and composed an encrypted message to Earth. His fingers moved across the holographic keyboard, spelling out 3 simple words. They did not listen. He sent the message and sat back in his chair. Through the window, he could see stars scattered across the darkness of space. Somewhere out there, human colonies prepared for conflict. On Earth, military commanders would read his message and begin preparations. The galaxy was about to learn something it should have understood from Daniel's warning. Humans did not make idle threats. They made promises, and when pushed, they kept those promises with brutal efficiency. Daniel closed his eyes and thought about the Vaxan fleet mobilizing toward human space. He thought about the colonists who would be threatened, the families who lived peaceful lives on distant worlds. He thought about the response Earth would unleash when those civilians came under threat. Ambassador Krelliix had been given multiple chances to walk away. He chose pride over wisdom. Soon he would learn the cost of that choice. Soon the entire galaxy would learn what humans meant when they said, "You do not want our attention." The alarm systems screamed across New Haven Colony at 4 in the morning local time. Governor Helen Price was already awake, standing in the command center, wearing her service uniform from 30 years of military experience. Her gray hair was pulled back tight and her weathered face showed no emotion as she watched the tactical display. 30 red dots appeared at the edge of the star system, each one representing a Vaxan warship entering their space. The communications officer turned toward her with wide eyes. He reported that the Vaxon fleet was broadcasting their presence as routine military exercises. Helen snorted at the obvious lie. She had commanded defensive positions during the border conflicts before retirement. She knew the difference between exercises and invasion formations. These ships were arranged in attack clusters with their weapons powered and shields raised. She ordered immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel and activation of all defense platforms. Her second-in-command asked about military support from Earth. Helen checked the tactical computer and felt her stomach tighten. The nearest Earth vessels were 2 full days away at maximum speed. She sent the priority distress call anyway, knowing that help would arrive too late if the Vaxons decided to attack immediately. She ordered her military teams to defensive positions and hoped the colony's shields would hold long enough for reinforcements to arrive. Deep in space between New Haven and Earth, Captain Paul Wright received the distress signal aboard the UES Defiant. His ship was new, one of Earth's latest deep space vessels equipped with technology the galaxy had not seen yet. He was a tall man with sandy hair and sharp blue eyes that had seen combat during the corporate wars in the outer colonies. He read the message twice before calling his senior officers to the bridge. His chief engineer protested when Paul ordered maximum speed beyond safety limits. She argued that pushing the engines that hard could cause permanent damage. Paul cut her off with a simple statement. 4,700 colonists on New Haven needed help, and they would get there in 18 hours instead of 2 days, or the engineer could explain to those civilians why mechanical concerns mattered more than their lives. The engineer's face went hard, and she nodded once before returning to her station. Within minutes, the Defiant's engines burned hotter than design specifications allowed. On Harmony Prime Station, Daniel Brooks moved through bureaucratic procedures with growing frustration. He filed emergency session requests that required approval from multiple departments. He submitted evidence of Vaxon aggression that needed review by council committees. Each step took hours, while the Vaxon fleet moved closer to New Haven. High Chancellor Vorn met him privately in a side chamber, his insectoid features unreadable. He explained that council procedures existed for good reasons. He said that rushing to judgment could create diplomatic incidents. Daniel asked what kind of incident might occur if 30 warships attacked a civilian colony. Vorn's antennae drooped slightly, but he had no answer that satisfied anyone. Back at New Haven, the Vaxon fleet completed their positioning. War Master Draxel commanded the force from his flagship. He was a massive specimen even among his species, covered in dark red scales with scars from a dozen campaigns. His yellow eyes gleamed as he studied the human colony on his tactical display. He saw weak defenses and a small population. He saw an opportunity to teach these primitive apes about their place in the galactic order. He opened a wideband transmission. His voice boomed across every frequency, translated automatically by communication systems. He announced that New Haven Colony was now under Vaxon authority. He demanded immediate surrender and complete evacuation of all human personnel within 12 hours. He stated that resistance would be met with overwhelming force. He said the Vaxon Empire was claiming this system for strategic purposes, and the Council would accept this as a legal occupation of disputed territory. Governor Price listened to the entire transmission before responding. Her voice came back cold and level. She thanked the War Master for his clear statement of intentions. She said it would be useful evidence for the War Crimes Tribunal. She offered him a counter-proposal. His fleet could leave within 1 hour, and this incident would be recorded as a misunderstanding. After 1 hour, any Vaxon ships remaining in the system would be considered hostile forces engaged in unprovoked aggression. She recommended he think carefully about his next action. Draxel laughed. The sound translated through speakers as a deep, rumbling growl. He called the governor's threat amusing. He said humans clearly did not understand military reality. He ordered his gunnery crews to disable the colony's main communication array as a demonstration of Vaxan superiority. His weapons officer protested that a civilian mining station was in the firing line. Draxel waved off the concern. Casualties would make the message clearer. The blast lit up space like a brief star. The mining station's shields lasted less than 3 seconds against military-grade weapons. The structure broke apart in silence, scattering debris and bodies into the void. 47 people died in an instant, their last moments spent in terror and confusion. The communication array survived, but the message was clear. The Vaxans were willing to kill civilians. On New Haven's command center, every screen showed the explosion. Helen Price stood frozen for one long moment. Around her, officers went pale or wept or shouted in rage. She felt something ancient wake up inside her chest, something from humanity's long, violent history. She had seen soldiers die in combat. That was war, and soldiers understood the risks. But these were miners, technicians, families working in what should have been safe space. The Vaxons had just committed the one act that turned human restraint into fury. She walked to the main communications station with measured steps. She composed a message to Earth with hands that did not shake, despite the rage burning through her veins. The message was brief. They drew first blood. She sent it with Earth's highest military priority code. Then she turned to her defense coordinator and spoke words that every human military officer understood. No quarter. If they want war, we give them war. On Earth, in the underground military command center beneath Geneva, Admiral Richard Stone read the message. He was an older man with white hair and dark skin, lined from years of commanding fleets. He had fought in 3 major conflicts and retired twice, only to be called back to service. He stood and walked to the main strategic display showing human space and the surrounding systems. Other officers gathered around him, their faces grim. The debate was brief. Some argued for measured response. Others demanded immediate retaliation. Stone listened to all of them before speaking. He talked about why Earth unified its governments after the Third World War. He reminded them of the doctrine humanity adopted when they realized they needed to survive themselves before facing the galaxy. Humans had agreed to be peaceful when possible and absolutely brutal when necessary. The Vaxans killed civilians. They needed to learn what happened when humanity stopped pretending to be civilized. His orders went out through encrypted channels to every military installation on Earth and throughout human space. Release the full fleet. Activate Protocol Reaper. The messages were simple, but their meaning was clear. Earth was going to war, and they would do it with every weapon and ship they possessed. The galaxy was about to see what humans really built during their 40 years of space travel. Daniel Brooks sat in his quarters trying to reach Krellix through private channels. The Vaxon ambassador refused all messages. Daniel tried messaging other Vaxon officials, tried calling in favors with neutral species, tried everything he could think of to stop what was coming. Finally, he recorded one last message and sent it directly to Vaxon High Command. He explained that they had 6 hours before learning why Earth unified under a single government. He said humans did not fight to win territory or resources. They fought until nothing capable of threatening them remained standing. The message was received and dismissed. Vaxan military doctrine did not include retreat from inferior opponents. They had fought dozens of species over the centuries. They had won every major conflict. These humans would be no different. The UES Defiant arrived at New Haven with its engines glowing red from overheating. Captain Paul Wright took one look at the debris field where the mining station died and felt his jaw clench. His tactical officer identified the Vaxan fleet's position. Paul ordered battle stations and moved his ship between the colony and the enemy. He opened communications to War Master Draxel. His message was simple. You have one chance to withdraw. After that, no quarter will be given. Draxel's response came back filled with amusement. He asked what one human ship could do against his entire fleet. Paul's answer was cold. "You are about to find out." Draxel laughed and ordered all 30 ships to target the Defiant. Every weapon system locked on, every crew prepared to fire. The War Master gave the command, and space erupted with energy. The Vaxan fleet fired as one. Hundreds of energy beams and missiles converged on the UES Defiant from 30 different angles. The amount of destructive power thrown at Paul Wright's ship should have vaporized it instantly. War Master Draxel watched his tactical display, expecting to see the human vessel disappear in a ball of fire. Instead, the Defiant's shields flared bright blue and absorbed everything. When the light faded, the human ship remained intact and its weapons were charging. Paul stood on his bridge with his hands gripped behind his back. His tactical officer called out damage reports that showed minimal shield depletion. His weapons officer requested permission to return fire. Paul gave it with a single word. The Defiant's railguns spoke with magnetic acceleration. 3 Vaxan cruisers took direct hits before their crews even realized the human ship was shooting back. The kinetic rounds punched through their shields like paper and tore through their hulls. 2 of the ships went dark immediately. The third spun out of control with atmosphere venting from a dozen breaches. Draxel stared at his display in disbelief. His scales bristled, and his claws dug into the armrests of his command chair. He screamed orders at his fleet to reform and concentrate fire. His crews scrambled to adjust their tactics. They launched another volley, this time with double the missile spread and coordinated beam strikes. The Defiant twisted through space with acceleration that should have crushed its crew. Its point defense systems came alive with streams of projectiles that intercepted 98% of incoming missiles. The few that got through detonated against shields that barely flickered. Then the space around New Haven began to tear. Not in one location, but hundreds of them simultaneously. Slip space portals opened like flowers blooming across the darkness. Ships emerged from faster-than-light travel with precision timing. First came destroyers and frigates moving in perfect formation, then cruisers and heavy battleships. Finally, the carriers arrived, massive vessels bristling with fighter craft and weapon systems. The UES Defiant was suddenly surrounded by Allied forces. 800 Earth Defense Force ships materialized in the span of 3 minutes. On the Vaxan flagship, officers froze at their stations. Draxel felt something he had not experienced in decades of military service: fear. His 30 ships were suddenly outnumbered 27-1, but it was not just the numbers. The human fleet moved with coordinated precision that spoke of decades of tactical development. Their formations were textbook perfect. Their positioning covered every possible escape vector. They had appeared exactly where they needed to be to trap his entire force. A transmission came through on all frequencies. Fleet Admiral John Carter spoke from his command ship with a voice like iron. He identified himself and his fleet. He stated that the Vaxans had killed 47 human civilians. He noted they had fired on a military vessel. He reminded them they had been offered multiple opportunities to withdraw. He said the Vaxan Empire had chosen war. Now Earth would teach them why that was a mistake. His final words carried no emotion, just simple fact. You wanted to see what humans can do. Watch carefully. What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a demonstration of military superiority so complete that later historians would struggle to classify it. The human fleet attacked with methodical efficiency. Their railguns fired rounds that moved faster than Vaxan sensors could track. The projectiles hit with kinetic energy that made shields useless. Vaxan armor crumpled like foil. Energy weapons designed to cut through reinforced hulls met adaptive shielding that learned and adjusted in real time. After the first few salvos, human shields were already optimized against Vaxan weapon frequencies. But the most terrifying aspect was the cyber warfare. Human artificial intelligence systems infiltrated Vaxan ship networks within minutes. 17 vessels suddenly went dark as their computer systems locked out their own crews. Navigation failed. weapons powered down, life support switched to minimal. The ships became floating coffins while their crews panicked in darkness. Emergency systems refused to activate. Manual overrides did not respond. The humans had taken control without firing a shot at those vessels. Sub-Commander Trixall served on one of the cruisers that still had functioning systems. She was young for her rank, promoted quickly due to skill rather than connections. She watched through her view screen as human ships systematically dismantled the Vaxxon fleet. A destroyer tried to make a run for the system's edge. 3 human frigates pursued it with casual ease. Their missiles were faster and smarter, adjusting course mid-flight to track evasive maneuvers. The destroyer died before it traveled 1,000 kilometers. Another cruiser attempted to fight back with everything it had. Human point defense intercepted every shot while return fire crippled the cruiser's engines. The vessel went adrift, helpless. Trixall sent a desperate message to Vaxxon High Command. Her hands shook as she typed. She reported that the human fleet was not trying to win. They were making an example. She said this was not military engagement but extermination. She begged for orders, for reinforcements, for anything. The response came back 3 hours later after the battle was already over. Stand down and await terms. Draxel tried to organize a retreat, but human ships covered every escape route. He attempted to rally his remaining forces for a coordinated assault. The humans responded by targeting his flagship's engines specifically. Precision strikes from 3 different ships hit simultaneously. His vessel's main power failed. Backup systems engaged, but the damage was catastrophic. The War Master found himself commanding a crippled ship in the middle of overwhelming enemy forces. On Harmony Prime Station, the Galactic Council's emergency session finally convened. Observer Quallen was a Zenthari military analyst assigned to document conflicts for the Council's historical records. He patched live telemetry from New Haven into the Council chambers. Every delegate watched in silence as human military doctrine revealed itself. They saw tactics honed over centuries of human warfare. They saw technology developed during a species' violent adolescence. They saw coordination that came from fighting themselves for thousands of years. High Chancellor Vorn turned to Ambassador Krelix, who sat in his designated area looking pale. The scales on his face had lost their usual vibrant color. Vorn's translated voice carried a mixture of shock and accusation. He asked if Krelix had known about human military capabilities. The Vaxxon ambassador had no answer. He had dismissed intelligence reports as exaggeration. He had assumed a young spacefaring species could not possibly match empires with millennia of experience. His arrogance had led to this. Daniel Brooks stood and addressed the council. His voice carried an edge that had not been there before. He explained that humanity had not hidden their capabilities, but simply had not been provoked enough to display them. He said every weapon system they were watching had been developed during Earth's own wars. He reminded them that he had warned Ambassador Krelix explicitly. He repeated the words that now carried terrible weight. You do not want Earth's attention. The council had laughed then. No one was laughing now. The battle ended within 2 hours. Of 30 Vaxxon ships, 22 were destroyed or disabled beyond repair. 3 were captured intact with their crews taken prisoner. 5 were allowed to escape. Those 5 were deliberately spared and given safe passage out of the system. Fleet Admiral Carter made sure they understood. They were messengers. They would return home and report what happened. The Vaxxon Empire needed to know exactly what Earth could do when provoked. Carter broadcast one more transmission. This time it went directly to Vaxxon Prime, to the Imperial Palace itself. He identified himself and his authority. He stated the facts without embellishment. Earth had eliminated the Vaxxon border fleet in response to the murder of 47 civilians. This was their only warning. Any further aggression toward human space or their allies would be met with escalation. Human forces would enter Vaxxon home systems. They would dismantle the Vaxxon war machine completely. They would ensure the Empire never threatened peaceful beings again. The choice was Vaxxan leadership's to make, but they needed to choose wisely. On New Haven, Governor Helen Price stood in the command center watching the debris field where the Vaxxan fleet had gathered. Dr. Amy Walsh worked in the medical bay treating the few injuries sustained during the brief exchange. The doctor had moved to New Haven 5 years ago seeking peaceful work after a career in military medicine. Now she was back to treating trauma and shock. She asked Helen if such brutal response was necessary. The governor's answer came hard. The Vaxxans chose to learn the hard way. They thought humans were weak. Now they know different. Amy pressed the question. She asked about proportional response, about the scale of destruction. Helen turned to face her. The governor's eyes showed no regret. She explained that humans learned a terrible lesson during their world wars. Peace only exists when the cost of war becomes unthinkable. The Vaxxans needed to understand that attacking humans carried consequences too severe to risk. Now the galaxy knows that lesson too. She said it with certainty. Earth would rather be feared and left alone than underestimated and constantly challenged. Captain Paul Wright received orders to remain at New Haven for security while the main fleet dispersed to patrol routes. His crew celebrated their victory, but he felt no joy in it. He had seen the Vaxxan ships break apart. He had watched escape pods fleeing dying vessels. War was war, but he took no pleasure in killing. He hoped the message was clear enough that this would not need to happen again. The 5 Vaxxan ships that escaped jumped to faster than light speed, carrying their terrible news home. On board, crews processed what they had witnessed. They had entered the system confident in their superiority. They left broken and terrified. One captain recorded a message for Vaxxan High Command. He said the humans had been toying with them. He reported that the human fleet's formation suggested they had been holding back significantly. He estimated they could have wiped out all 30 ships in under 10 minutes if they wanted. The fact that 5 were allowed to leave proved the humans were sending a message, not fighting a war. The footage spread through galactic networks within hours of the battle. Every spacefaring civilization watched the recordings with growing unease. The Battle of New Haven became required viewing in military academies across dozens of worlds. Analysts studied the human tactics frame by frame. Strategists rewrote their assessments of Earth's capabilities. Diplomats scrambled to adjust their policies toward humanity. The galaxy was being forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. They had badly underestimated the newest species to join their community. On Vaxxan Prime, the Imperial Palace descended into chaos. Empress Calcin convened her war council within hours of receiving reports from the surviving ships. She was a formidable ruler who had consolidated power through both political skill and military success. Her scales were deep purple, marking her as royalty among the Vaxxan people. Her yellow eyes blazed with rage as she listened to the captain's testimony. The officer described the human fleet's arrival and the systematic destruction that followed. He spoke of weapons that ignored shields and cyber attacks that crippled ships without physical damage. The military commanders demanded immediate retaliation. General Vexilon pounded the table with his clawed fist and declared that Vaxxan honor required response. He spoke of mobilizing the full Imperial fleet, of striking at Earth itself. Other officers joined his call, their voices rising in a chorus of outrage. The Empire had not suffered such a defeat in over 3 centuries. They could not appear weak before the other galactic powers. Empress Calcin raised one hand and silence fell. She turned to her intelligence minister and asked for a complete assessment. The minister was an older Vaxxan named Sectar, who had served 3 emperors before her. He pulled up holographic displays showing Earth's military infrastructure. The data painted a sobering picture. Orbital shipyards around Earth and its colonies were massive, larger than Vaxxan facilities despite humanity's shorter time in space. production rates suggested humans built ships at 3 times the Vaxxan pace. The fleet that destroyed their border force represented only 12% of Earth's total military capacity. Sektar continued with worse news. Human technology appeared more advanced in several key areas. Their artificial intelligence systems were decades ahead of Vaxxan computer science. Their materials engineering produced armor and weapons that outperformed anything the Empire possessed. Most troubling, the humans had clearly been developing military technology long before achieving space travel. They had not followed the usual pattern of peaceful exploration, followed by gradual militarization. They built weapons first and explored second. The Empress listened to the full briefing before speaking. Her voice cut through the room like a blade. She asked her generals a simple question. If they mobilized the full fleet and attacked Earth, what would the outcome be? The silence that followed answered her question. General Vexilon finally admitted that victory was uncertain at best. The humans had shown tactical superiority and technological advantages. A full war might destroy both civilizations. The Vaxxan Empire would survive, but it would be crippled for generations. Back on Harmony Prime Station, the Galactic Council continued its emergency sessions. Multiple species demanded investigations into human military buildup. Others argued that the Vaxxans had provoked the conflict and deserved their defeat. The debates grew heated as ancient political alliances fractured under the pressure of changing power dynamics. Ambassador Kreliex sat quietly through most sessions, his earlier arrogance completely gone. He had become a symbol of the danger in underestimating others. Daniel Brooks found himself at the center of intense diplomatic attention. Ambassador Prylox of the peaceful Diluvian Concord requested a private meeting. Her species were small and fragile, standing only 4 feet tall with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes. They had achieved space travel through scientific excellence rather than military power. They survived by forming alliances with stronger species. Prylox spoke softly, admitting that humans terrified her people. She asked Daniel to help her understand how a species became so efficient at destruction. Daniel considered his answer carefully. He explained Earth's history without glorifying it. He described thousands of years of tribal warfare, of empires rising and falling, of technological advancement driven by military necessity. He talked about the world wars that killed tens of millions. He mentioned nuclear weapons developed when humans still lacked computers. He explained how humanity nearly destroyed itself multiple times before finally unifying under a single government. The unification came not from peace, but from exhaustion, from the realization that continued conflict meant extinction. Prylox listened with her large eyes focused on his face. She asked the question that haunted many species. How does a predator species control its violent nature? Daniel's answer was honest. Humans did not stop being violent. They channeled that violence into protecting rather than conquering. They learned to see all of humanity as their tribe, their pack. External threats unified them instantly because the instinct to defend their people was stronger than internal divisions. The Vaxxans had triggered that instinct by killing civilians. On Earth, political debates raged in the global parliament chambers. Senator Greg Morrison led a faction arguing that humanity had revealed too much of their capabilities too quickly. He stood before the assembly speaking passionately about the value of being underestimated. He pointed out that now every species would either fear humans or view them as threats to be neutralized. The element of surprise was gone. Future conflicts would be against enemies who came prepared for human tactics. Admiral Stone addressed the Parliament in response. He was not a politician, but his words carried weight earned through decades of service. He explained that the demonstration at New Haven was necessary and calculated. Better for the galaxy to fear human capabilities than to constantly test them. The Vaxxans attacked because they thought humans were weak. Now every potential aggressor would think twice. The cost of 47 civilian deaths was terrible, but escalation could have killed millions. Showing overwhelming force early might prevent the larger war. The vote came down narrowly in favor of the military's approach. Earth would maintain its current posture, neither apologizing for the response nor seeking further conflict. They would wait to see how the Vaxxan Empire reacted. Dr. Amy Walsh made a discovery that changed the narrative significantly. While treating wounded colonists from New Haven, she reviewed data recovered from the destroyed mining station. The station's sensors had been monitoring unusual activity for weeks before the attack. She found evidence of Vaxxan surveillance equipment placed in the area over a month earlier. Communication logs showed Vaxxan ships making regular visits to the buffer zone. The military exercise claim was clearly false. The Vaxxans had been planning this operation for a long time. Daniel presented this evidence to the Galactic Council in a formal session. He displayed the surveillance data and communication intercepts. He showed how Vaxxan ships had been positioning for invasion while claiming peaceful intentions. The attack on the mining station was not a warning shot gone wrong. It was deliberate targeting of civilians to spread terror. The narrative shifted dramatically. What had appeared to some as human overreaction now looked like justified response to premeditated aggression. High Chancellor Vorn called for a formal inquiry into Vaxxan actions. For the first time in over 1,000 years, a major galactic empire faced accountability for aggression against a smaller power. The precedent was significant. Larger species had always operated with implicit freedom to bully weaker ones. The Council's rules theoretically protected all members equally, but enforcement had always been selective. Human military power was forcing the Council to actually uphold its own principles. The most significant consequence developed quietly over the following weeks. Small species who had suffered under larger empires for centuries began reaching out to Earth through unofficial channels. The Diluvian Concord sent trade delegation proposals. The Rix Combine requested military advisors. 3 other species inquired about mutual defense agreements. None of them asked directly for protection, but the implications were clear. Humanity had proven they would defend their people with overwhelming force. That made Earth an attractive potential ally for anyone facing stronger neighbors. The Vaxxan Empire found itself increasingly isolated. Species who had maintained friendly relations began distancing themselves. Trade agreements came up for renegotiation with less favorable terms. The economic impact started to hurt. Military allies quietly reviewed their commitments. No one wanted to be associated with the empire that had provoked humanity and lost so badly. Empress Calzin watched her empire's position deteriorate day by day. She consulted with advisors and read intelligence reports. The pattern was clear. The Vaxxan Empire was becoming a pariah state. They could try to fight their way back to prominence, but that meant war with multiple fronts. Or they could accept the new reality and seek peace. The choice felt like surrender, but the alternative was potential destruction. She made the decision that would define her reign. She composed a formal request to Earth's government asking for direct negotiations. No intermediaries, no council oversight. A meeting between Vaxxan and human leadership to establish peace terms. Her military commanders protested that it made them look weak. She pointed out that they were weak, at least compared to humanity. Pretending otherwise would only make things worse. The request reached Geneva, where Earth's government leaders debated the response. Some argued for refusing, for making the Vaxxans come to the council. Others saw opportunity. Direct negotiations would establish Earth's position as a power capable of independent diplomacy rather than a junior species needing council oversight. Admiral Stone's recommendation was simple. Negotiate from strength. Make clear this was not a treaty between equals. This was humanity dictating terms that would prevent future aggression. Fleet Admiral Carter received new orders from Earth's civilian government. Meet with Vaxxan leadership. Establish terms. Ensure those terms made future conflict too costly to consider. Make the galaxy understand that humans were not conquerors, but they would accept nothing less than complete security for their people. The orders concluded with a reminder. 47 civilians died because the Vaxans thought humans were weak. The peace that followed needed to ensure no one made that mistake again. News of the upcoming negotiations spread through diplomatic channels. Species across the galaxy watched with intense interest. The outcome would establish precedents that shaped interstellar relations for decades. Humanity was only 40 years into space travel, but they were already reshaping the political landscape. Some observers called it remarkable, others called it terrifying. Daniel Brooks called it inevitable. A species that survived what humans survived did not stay weak for long. Empress Calzin's shuttle approached Earth with an escort of 3 Vaxan diplomatic vessels. Captain Paul Wright commanded the human squadron assigned to meet them. The UES Defiant led 5 other ships in a formation that was technically an honor guard, but everyone understood the implicit message. These were the same vessels that had destroyed the Vaxan border fleet. The escort was both courtesy and reminder. Paul opened communications and welcomed the Empress with formal protocol. His voice carried no warmth, but no hostility either. Professional distance was the tone. During the flight toward Earth, Cal Sin sat in her private quarters studying reports on human military development. She asked Paul for a direct conversation without diplomatic filters. He agreed, and his face appeared on her personal screen. She posed the question that had haunted her since receiving the battle reports. How did humanity develop such advanced military capability so quickly after achieving interstellar travel? Paul's response was delivered with the same flat professionalism. Humans did not develop these capabilities quickly. They possessed them before leaving their solar system. Every weapon system Earth deployed in space was an adaptation of technology created for planetary warfare. Railguns were centuries old. Nuclear weapons were older. Artificial intelligence had been developing since the 21st century. Humanity simply miniaturized the technology, improved efficiency, and mounted it on starships. Cal Sin felt something cold settle in her stomach. She asked how long humans had possessed weapons capable of planetary destruction. Paul checked his historical database before answering. Since 1945, over 400 years ago. The Vaxan Empress tried to process that timeline. Humans had the ability to destroy their own world for 4 centuries before they achieved faster-than-light travel. They lived with that capability hanging over them for generations. The psychological impact must have been enormous. Paul confirmed her thoughts. Growing up with extinction as a constant possibility shaped human thinking in fundamental ways. It taught them to take threats seriously and to respond with overwhelming force. The shuttle entered Earth's atmosphere and descended toward Geneva. Cal Sin looked through the viewport at the planet below. She saw cities sprawling across continents, massive structures reaching toward the sky, orbital installations visible as bright points against the darkness of space. This was the death world Daniel Brooks had described, the planet where everything evolved to kill or survive being killed. Humanity's home looked beautiful from orbit, but she understood now that beauty was deceptive. The peace negotiations took place in the same building where Earth's unified government had been founded after their last world war. The symbolism was deliberate, and Cal Sin recognized it. She entered the conference room accompanied by her diplomatic staff. Fleet Admiral Carter and Admiral Stone represented Earth's military. Senator Morrison represented civilian government. Daniel Brooks attended as the liaison who had warned them this would happen. The terms were presented without preamble. Fleet Admiral Carter outlined each point with clinical precision. The Vaxan Empire would withdraw from all disputed territories immediately. They would pay reparations to New Haven Colony totaling 50 billion credits over 10 years. They would submit to monitoring of their military fleet composition by neutral council observers. They would sign a binding non-aggression pact with all Galactic Council members. Finally, Vaxxan ships were forbidden from entering human space for 50 years. Any violation would be treated as an act of war. Empress Calcin listened to each term and felt the weight of defeat. She protested that the terms were humiliating for her empire. Senator Morrison's response was direct and uncompromising. The Vaxxans murdered 47 civilians and started a war they could not win. They were fortunate Earth was offering terms at all, rather than dismantling their empire piece by piece. He advised her to accept these conditions, or Earth would impose harsher ones. The choice was hers, but she needed to decide quickly. The Empress looked at Daniel Brooks, who had remained silent throughout the negotiation. She asked for a private word with him. The others left the room, and she faced the human who had tried to warn her ambassador. She posed the question that burned in her mind. Why did humans not warn more explicitly? Why speak in vague terms about not wanting Earth's attention? Daniel's answer revealed the tragedy underlying everything. Humans did warn explicitly, multiple times, but the Vaxxans were so certain of their superiority that they could not conceive of a primitive species being a genuine threat. That was not a failure of communication. That was a failure of imagination on the Vaxxan side. Calcin absorbed his words and recognized the truth in them. Her people had looked at humanity and seen only 40 years of space travel. They had dismissed thousands of years of violent history as irrelevant to modern warfare. They had assumed technological advancement followed a standard pattern. They had been wrong about all of it. She signed the treaty without further protest. The alternative was watching her empire collapse under economic isolation and potential military action. The treaty ratification ceremony took place at the Galactic Council Station. High Chancellor Vorn presided over the formal proceedings. Every member species sent representatives to witness the historic moment. The chamber was filled to capacity. Daniel took his place in the human section, now officially appointed as Earth's first full ambassador to the Council. His promotion reflected humanity's elevated status in galactic politics. Vorn delivered a speech that would be studied in diplomatic academies for generations. He spoke about the danger of assumptions and the importance of respecting all species, regardless of how long they had traveled the stars. He reminded the Council that advancement was not measured solely by age, but by what challenges a species had overcome. Humanity emerged from a crucible that would have destroyed most civilizations. They carried that strength with them. Every species needed to respect it or face the consequences the Vaxxans encountered. Ambassador Prelox approached Daniel after the ceremony with unexpected news. The Diluvian Concord wished to establish formal diplomatic and trade relations with Earth. Within the following week, 12 other species made similar requests. Small civilizations that had existed in the shadow of larger empires suddenly saw an opportunity. Humanity had proven they would defend their people with devastating efficiency. That made Earth an attractive potential ally for anyone facing stronger neighbors. On New Haven Colony, Governor Helen Price oversaw the reconstruction efforts. The memorial to the 47 killed colonists was completed 3 months after the battle. It stood in the central plaza, a simple structure of black stone, with each name carved in precise letters. The dedication ceremony drew thousands of colonists. Helen spoke briefly about the cost of peace and the importance of remembering those who died. Dr. Amy Walsh attended and added her own thoughts. The memorial would serve as a reminder that human strength came with responsibility to protect those who could not protect themselves. Captain Paul Wright received promotion to Fleet Admiral and command of Earth's first deep space exploration fleet. His mission was to explore beyond known galactic space, seeking new worlds and potentially new civilizations. The orders came with an interesting directive. Earth wanted exploration to continue, but now every species they encountered would already know about humanity. The fear in alien eyes would be tempered by respect. Paul accepted the responsibility of representing humanity to the unknown galaxy. He understood that first contact scenarios had changed. Humans would never again be underestimated. Fleet Admiral Carter addressed the combined Earth Defense Forces in a speech broadcast across all human space. He stood at attention in his dress uniform and spoke about the Battle of New Haven. He reminded them that humanity had not wanted the conflict. They tried to avoid it through diplomatic warnings, but when forced to fight, they fought with all the skill and determination that only humans possessed. The galaxy now understood that Earth stood as a shield for their people. Future aggressors would think carefully before threatening human colonies. Friends of humanity would know that Earth's protection was absolute. Daniel Brooks gave his first official address to the Galactic Council as Earth's ambassador. He stood at the human podium wearing the diplomatic corps uniform with new insignia reflecting his rank. He spoke about the warning he had delivered to Ambassador Krelix months earlier. He expressed regret that the warning had not been heeded. He noted that war was a terrible teacher, but its lessons lasted. Humanity learned centuries ago that peace was precious and worth defending. They hoped the rest of the galaxy could learn that lesson without paying the same terrible cost humans had paid during their own history. The council session concluded with formal votes acknowledging Earth's position as a major galactic power. Humanity held no territory beyond their colonies. They commanded no empire. But they possessed military capability that rivaled civilizations 10 times older. Their willingness to use that capability when provoked had been demonstrated. The balance of galactic power had shifted. Ambassador Krelix requested a private meeting with Daniel before leaving the station permanently. The Vaxxon ambassador was being recalled to his homeworld, his career effectively ended by his miscalculation. He wanted to understand one thing. If humans knew the Vaxxons were underestimating them, why did they not simply demonstrate their power earlier? Why allow the situation to escalate to violence? Daniel's answer was simple. Humans preferred being underestimated. It provided strategic advantage, but more importantly, Earth genuinely wanted peace. They hoped diplomatic warnings would be sufficient. The tragedy was that pride prevented the Vaxxons from hearing those warnings until it was too late. 6 months after the Battle of New Haven, the first joint human-alien scientific expedition launched from Earth. Dr. Amy Walsh served as chief medical officer for the mission. The crew included humans and members of 5 other species working together to explore an ancient derelict vessel discovered at the edge of known space. The cooperation demonstrated that humanity was more than warriors. They were also scientists, explorers, and builders. The galaxy settled into a new equilibrium. The Vaxxon Empire accepted its diminished status and focused on internal reforms. Smaller species formed a loose coalition with Earth providing unofficial protection through their reputation alone. The Galactic Council functioned with renewed attention to its founding principles. Large species no longer assumed they could bully smaller ones without consequence. Earth continued building ships and training forces, but also invested heavily in diplomatic and scientific endeavors. The lesson of their own history guided policy. Strength alone was not enough. Humanity needed to be strong enough to deter aggression, but restrained enough to avoid becoming the threat they defended against. The final image was of Earth viewed from orbit. Ships moved in synchronized patterns around the planet, a mix of military vessels and exploration craft. A new medical ship was launching, heading toward a distant system where plague had devastated an alien population. Earth was sending help because that was what strong species did. They protected the weak and healed the injured. A transmission went out from Earth's diplomatic corps to all member species of the Galactic Council. The message was simple, but carried weight earned through demonstrated capability. Humanity sought peaceful relations with all civilizations. They offered friendship to those who valued cooperation. They promised devastating response to those who threatened innocence. The choice belonged to each species. Earth would react accordingly. Daniel Brooks recorded a personal log entry in his quarters on Harmony Prime Station. He reflected on the journey from his first warning to the current state of galactic affairs. He noted that humans had tried to avoid revealing their full capabilities. The Vaxxons forced that revelation through their aggression. Now the galaxy knew what humanity could do when pushed. The hope was that knowledge would prevent future conflicts. Time would tell if the lesson lasted, or if another species would eventually need to learn the hard way. He concluded his entry with the words that had defined everything. You do not want Earth's attention. But if you earn humanity's friendship, you will never need to fear again. That was the message Earth offered the galaxy. Peace through strength and friendship through loyalty. Humanity had proven they excelled at both.
The stars looked different here. Fleet Leader Vextal pressed his long fingers against the viewing port of the Harmony's edge and studied the unknown region of space. His ship had been exploring for 3 months, mapping new star systems and looking for planets that might support life. The Zephyrians were always searching for new worlds to study and new friends to meet. Fleet Leader, we are detecting something strange, called Science Commander Ithara from her station. Her voice carried the musical tone that all Zephyrians used when they were excited about a discovery. Vextal moved away from the window and walked to the center of the bridge. The Harmony's edge was built for peace and exploration. Its walls were smooth and curved, painted in soft colors that helped keep the crew calm during long journeys. There were no weapons on board, only scientific equipment and tools for making contact with new species. What have you found? Vextal asked. Ithara's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as she read the data on her screen. There is a vessel drifting near the 3rd planet of this system. It appears to be damaged. The energy readings are unlike anything in our database. Show me. The main screen flickered to life, displaying an image that made the bridge crew gasp. The ship, floating in space, was nothing like their own vessel. Where the Harmony's edge was smooth and graceful, this unknown craft was angular and harsh. Its surface was covered in what looked like metal plates, and dark scars ran across its hull. By the 7 moons, whispered Navigator Tellith. What kind of beings would build such a thing? The damaged ship was roughly the same size as their own, but it looked like it had been through a terrible accident. Parts of its hull were twisted and burned. Strange objects stuck out from its surface at odd angles, and several sections appeared to be completely destroyed. Are there life signs? Vextal asked. Yes, Ithara replied, her voice growing more excited. I detect multiple biological signatures. The beings inside appear to be alive but unconscious. Their ship has minimal power, and life support systems are failing. Vextal felt his heart beating faster. First contact with a new species was always thrilling, but this situation was also dangerous. These unknown beings were in serious trouble. Inside the damaged ship, Captain Jake Sullivan floated unconscious in his command chair. The USS Liberty had been drifting for 3 days since the battle with the raiders. Most of the crew was unconscious, from the toxic gas that had leaked from the damaged life support systems. The emergency power was nearly gone, and the ship was slowly dying in the cold of space. First Officer Lisa Morgan was the first to wake up. She had been thrown against a wall during the last enemy attack, and her head still hurt badly. She pushed herself up from the floor and looked around the bridge. Sparks fell from broken control panels, and the air tasted of smoke and metal. Computer, status report, she said weakly. Main power offline. Life support at 15%. Hull breaches. On decks 4 through 7. Weapon systems destroyed. Communication array damaged. The computer's voice was distorted and hard to understand. Lisa pulled herself to her station and tried to restore some power. The Liberty was a warship, built for fighting and surviving in dangerous situations. Even badly damaged, it was still functional enough to keep the crew alive for a little while longer. As she worked, she noticed something on the sensors. A large ship was approaching slowly. Lisa's training kicked in immediately. Unknown vessels could be more raiders coming to finish them off. "Computer, identify the approaching ship," she ordered. Unable to comply. Design does not match any known configuration. Lisa managed to restore partial power to the main screen. What she saw confused her completely. The approaching ship looked nothing like any vessel she had ever seen. It was smooth and elegant, with no visible weapons or armor. It moved slowly and carefully, as if its crew was being very cautious. On the Harmony's edge, the Zephyrians continued to study the strange damaged ship. "Their technology is fascinating," Ithara reported. "The hull appears to be made from multiple layers of different metals. These beings know how to build things that can survive extreme damage." "But why would they need such strong ships?" asked Teleth. "What dangers do they face in their home space?" Vextal wondered the same thing. The Zephyrians lived in a peaceful part of the galaxy. Their ships were built for comfort and scientific research, not for surviving attacks. The idea that someone might need such heavy protection was troubling. "Try to establish communication," Vextal ordered. "Use the standard mathematical sequences." The Harmony's edge began broadcasting simple mathematical patterns that any intelligent species should recognize: prime numbers, geometric sequences, and basic equations that showed they were trying to make peaceful contact. On the Liberty, Lisa heard the strange signals coming through the communication system. She had never heard anything like it before, but she recognized that it was some kind of message. Someone was trying to talk to them. She quickly woke up Communications Officer Brad Turner, who had been unconscious at his station. Brad was groggy and confused, but he understood the situation immediately when Lisa explained what was happening. "It's mathematics," Brad said after listening to the signals for several minutes. "Basic mathematical concepts. This is how scientists think aliens might try to communicate with us." "Are they hostile?" Lisa asked. Brad studied the approaching ship on the screen. "I don't think so. Look at their ship. It doesn't look like a weapon, and they're trying to talk to us instead of attacking." Lisa made a decision that would change everything for both species. She told Brad to respond with the same kind of mathematical signals, showing that humans were intelligent and wanted to communicate. The response from the Liberty made the Zephyrian bridge crew celebrate with joy. They had made contact with a new species, and these beings seemed to be intelligent and peaceful. "Prepare a medical team," Vextal ordered. "These beings are injured and need help. This is the most important day in our exploration history." Neither species realized yet how much this meeting would change their understanding of the galaxy and each other. Captain Jake Sullivan woke up with a terrible headache. The last thing he remembered was the explosion on the bridge when the raiders hit their weapon systems. Now he was lying in the medical bay, breathing clean air for the first time in days. "Welcome back, Captain," said Dr. Patricia Wells as she checked his vital signs. "You've been unconscious for almost 4 days. We have visitors." Sullivan sat up slowly, his head still spinning. "Visitors? What kind of visitors?" "The alien kind," Patricia replied with a small smile. "They saved our lives. Their medical supplies are keeping us alive right now." Sullivan looked around the medical bay and noticed strange equipment he had never seen before. Soft blue lights glowed from devices that seemed to be monitoring the injured crew members. The air smelled clean and fresh, nothing like the smoky, metallic taste they had been breathing since the battle. "Where's Morgan?" Sullivan asked. "On the bridge, talking with them. They've been trying to learn our languages for the past 2 days. They're very smart, Captain, and very curious about us." Sullivan made his way to the bridge, still feeling weak. What he saw there amazed him. First Officer Lisa Morgan was sitting at a table with 3 beings that looked completely different from any human. They were tall and thin, with pale blue skin and 4 eyes arranged around their heads. Their movements were graceful and careful, and they spoke in musical tones. "Captain Sullivan," Morgan said when she saw him. "Meet Science Commander Ithara, Navigator Teleth, and Medical Specialist Kotham. They're from a species called the Zephyrians." The 3 aliens stood up when they saw Sullivan. Ithara stepped forward and made a gesture that seemed like a bow. "We are honored to meet the leader of your vessel," she said in careful English. "We have learned much of your language from your computer systems. We hope we did not overstep by accessing your databases. Sullivan was impressed. In just 2 days, they had learned English well enough to have a conversation. "You saved our lives," he said. "You can access whatever you need." "Your species is fascinating," Ithara continued, "but we are confused by many things we have learned about you. May we ask you questions?" "Of course." The Zephyrian scientist pulled out a device that projected images in the air. Sullivan saw pictures of Earth, human cities, and historical events that the aliens had found in the Liberty's computer files. "Your world is beautiful," Tellith said, "but we do not understand these images. They show your people fighting each other, large groups of humans using weapons against other humans. We thought these might be entertainment programs, but your computer says they are historical records." Sullivan realized what they were looking at: wars, battles, conflicts from throughout human history. He had never thought about how this might look to a species that had never experienced warfare. "Those are real events," Sullivan said carefully. "Humans sometimes fight each other. We don't always agree on things, and sometimes disagreements become violent." The three Zephyrians looked at each other with expressions that Sullivan couldn't read. Thara's four eyes blinked rapidly, which seemed to indicate she was upset or confused. "But why would you hurt your own species?" she asked. "Surely talking would solve these problems better than violence." "We try talking first," Sullivan explained. "But sometimes people want things they can't have, or they believe things that hurt others. When talking doesn't work, fighting sometimes happens." Medical specialist Kotham stepped forward. "We have scanned your bodies and your ship. Your species appears to be designed for fighting. Your muscles are much stronger than ours, your bones are denser. Your ship is built like armor. Do you fight often?" Sullivan thought about how to answer that question honestly. "More often than we'd like. There are dangerous people in the galaxy, pirates, raiders, conquerors. Sometimes you have to fight them to protect innocent people. The damage to your ship," Tellith said quietly. "This came from fighting?" "Yes. We were protecting a colony world from raiders. They had better numbers, but we drove them off before they could hurt the civilians." The Zephyrians went very quiet. They whispered to each other in their own language, and Sullivan could tell they were disturbed by what he had told them. Engineer Danny Rodriguez chose that moment to enter the bridge. He had been working with Zephyrian technicians to repair the Liberty's systems, and he looked excited about something. "Captain, you have to see what these folks can do with technology," Danny said. "Their engineering is incredible. They've fixed our life support system better than it was before the battle. But Captain, I think we might have scared them a little." "What do you mean?" "Well, they were helping me repair the weapon systems, and when they realized what our guns could do, they got real quiet. I don't think they've ever seen weapons like ours before," Ithara spoke up. "Your weapons are designed to destroy other ships completely. We have never seen such powerful destructive devices. In our space, we have tools for moving asteroids and clearing space debris, but nothing meant to hurt other beings." Sullivan was beginning to understand the problem. "How long has your species been traveling in space?" "Nearly 3,000 years, Tellith replied. "We have met 17 other intelligent species in that time. All of them were peaceful, like us." "Have you ever encountered hostile aliens? Pirates or raiders?" The three Zephyrians looked confused by the question. "Why would anyone attack strangers?" Kotham asked. "When we meet new species, we share knowledge and resources. Everyone benefits from cooperation." Commander Helen Price entered the bridge at that moment. She was the Liberty's tactical officer, and she had been reviewing the ship's defensive systems. When she saw the aliens, she stopped and stared. "Captain, are these our new friends?" she asked. "I've been going over our weapon systems. The damage looks worse than it is. We could be combat ready in another day or two." The word combat made all three Zephyrians step backward. Ithara's musical voice became higher and more strained. "You are preparing for more fighting?" she asked. "Just in case," Price replied, not understanding the aliens' reaction. "You never know who might show up. It's better to be ready." Sullivan saw the fear in the Zephyrians' eyes. "Helen, maybe we should focus on repairs that get us home, not combat readiness." But the damage was done. The aliens now understood that humans didn't just fight when they had to. They were always ready to fight. They prepared for battles that might never happen. They built their entire society around the possibility of violence. "We need to contact our leaders," Ithara said quietly. "They must know about your species before we proceed further." "Are we in trouble?" Sullivan asked. "We do not know," Tellith replied honestly. "We have never met a species like yours. Our people will need time to understand what you are and whether you are safe to be around." Sullivan felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. Humanity's first contact with a peaceful alien species, and they had already frightened them. He wondered if there was any way to convince the Zephyrians that humans could be trusted, or if their reputation as warriors would make friendship impossible. The bridge fell silent as both species realized how different they really were. The Zephyrians saw humans as dangerous predators who solved problems with violence. The humans saw Zephyrians as naive innocents who had never faced real danger. Neither side knew how to bridge such a huge gap in understanding. Outside the ship, more Zephyrian vessels were approaching. Word of the strange, warlike aliens was spreading through their peaceful space, and everyone wanted to see these beings who carried weapons among the stars. 3 days later, Captain Sullivan stood in the main conference room of the Zephyrian station called Peaceful Harbor. The name made him smile sadly. Everything about these aliens spoke of peace and safety. The walls were covered in soft colors. The furniture was comfortable and gentle music played in the background. Across the table sat Fleet Leader Vextal and 4 other Zephyrian leaders. They had been asking questions about human society for hours, and Sullivan could see the worry growing in their 4 eyes. "Captain Sullivan," said Council Leader Nathara, an elderly Zephyrian with silver markings on her blue skin. "Our people are frightened. Word has spread through our colonies about your species. Some are asking if we should avoid human space entirely." Sullivan felt tired. He had been trying to explain humanity for days, but every answer seemed to make things worse. "We're not monsters," he said quietly. "We fight to protect people, not to hurt them." "But you carry weapons that could destroy entire planets," Vextal pointed out. "Your ship's computer contains plans for devices that could kill millions of beings. Why would peaceful people need such terrible power?" "Because not everyone in the galaxy is peaceful," Sullivan replied. "There are species out there who take what they want by force. Pirates who steal and kill. Empires that conquer weaker worlds. If good people don't have weapons, then only bad people will have them." The Zephyrians whispered among themselves in their musical language. Sullivan caught a few words he had learned. They were talking about death makers and violence bringers, science commander. Ithara leaned forward. "Captain, we have lived in peace for over 2,000 years. We have met many species and all of them were reasonable. When there are disagreements, we talk until we find solutions that help everyone. Violence is never necessary." "You've been lucky," Sullivan said. "The part of space you live in must be safe. But out there," he pointed toward the window showing the stars, "there are beings who don't care about talking. They see weakness and they attack." "Perhaps," said Council Leader Nathara, "but our concern is this. How do we know that humans are the protectors you claim to be? How do we know you are not the dangerous ones?" Before Sullivan could answer, Navigator Amy Chen entered the room. She had been working with Zephyrian scientists to map local space routes, and she looked excited. "Captain, sorry to interrupt, but the Zephyrians have agreed to show us their military training programs. They want to demonstrate their defensive capabilities." Fleet Leader Vextal nodded. "We thought it would help you understand our way of handling conflicts. We have prepared our most challenging war simulation. It will show you that violence is not always the answer to problems." Sullivan was curious about what these peaceful aliens considered military training. "We'd be honored to observe." The group moved to the station's simulation center. The room was large and filled with holographic equipment that could create realistic training scenarios. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster and several other Liberty crew members were already there, watching Zephyrian technicians prepare the program. "This is our most difficult combat exercise," explained Military Coordinator Velthas, a Zephyrian who seemed more serious than the others. It simulates a rescue mission in hostile territory. The goal is to save civilians while avoiding all conflict with enemy forces. The simulation began. Sullivan watched as holographic Zephyrian ships entered a dangerous asteroid field where civilian vessels were trapped. Enemy ships patrolled the area, but the Zephyrian commanders worked carefully to avoid detection. They used stealth technology and patient maneuvering to reach the civilians without being seen. It took them 3 hours to complete the rescue, and they considered it a success because no shots were fired and no one was hurt. "Impressive," Sullivan said, and he meant it. The Zephyrians had shown remarkable skill at avoiding conflict while accomplishing their mission. "Your turn," Velthas said with pride. "Let us see how humans would handle the same situation." Sullivan looked at his crew. Commander Helen Price was studying the simulation data with interest. Engineer Danny Rodriguez was examining the holographic controls. Navigator Amy Chen was plotting potential courses through the asteroid field. "Are you sure?" Sullivan asked. "Our methods might be very different from yours." "We insist," Nithara said. "We want to understand human military thinking." Sullivan nodded to his crew. "All right, but remember, we're soldiers. We approach problems differently than explorers do." The simulation restarted. This time, Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster took command of the tactical display while Amy Chen handled navigation. Sullivan watched his crew work with the efficiency that came from years of training and real combat experience. Instead of avoiding the enemy patrol ships, Foster immediately identified their weaknesses. He plotted an attack route that would disable their engines without destroying them completely. Amy calculated a flight path that used the asteroid field as cover for an assault rather than hiding. "Wait," Velthas said, his voice rising with alarm. "You are planning to attack the enemy forces? The goal is to avoid conflict." "The goal is to save the civilians," Foster replied calmly. "The fastest way to do that is to neutralize the threat." What happened next left the Zephyrians speechless. The human crew completed the rescue mission in 18 minutes. They disabled the enemy ships with precise attacks, cleared safe paths through the asteroids with controlled explosions, and evacuated all civilians with military efficiency. No, one died in the simulation. But the Zephyrians watched in stunned silence as the humans treated combat like a routine procedure. They showed no hesitation, no fear, and no doubt about using violence to solve the problem quickly. "How did you do that so fast?" Ithara whispered. "Practice," Sullivan said simply. "We train for situations like this all the time." "But the violence," Velthas said, his voice shaking. "You destroyed their weapon systems without hesitation. You used explosives in the asteroid field. You could have hurt innocent people." "But we didn't," Amy Chen pointed out. "We calculated every shot, every explosion. We knew exactly what would happen before we acted. This is what frightens us," Council Leader Nithara said quietly. "You make violence look easy. You turn destruction into an art form. How do we know you won't use these skills against us someday?" The room fell silent. Sullivan could see the fear in every Zephyrian face. They had asked for a demonstration, and his crew had given them exactly what they requested. But seeing human military capabilities in action had made their fears worse, not better. "Because," Sullivan said finally, "we only fight people who hurt innocent others. You're not our enemies. You're not trying to conquer anyone or steal anything or hurt civilians. Why would we fight you?" "But what if we disagreed about something important?" Vextal asked. "What if our peoples wanted the same thing and couldn't share it? Would you use your weapons against us then?" Sullivan thought about the question carefully. It was the heart of their fear, and he needed to answer it honestly. "We would talk first, just like you do," he said. "We would negotiate and compromise and find solutions that work for everyone. But if talking failed, and if you tried to take something by force or hurt our people, then yes, we would fight back." The Zephyrians looked at each other with expressions of deep concern. They had their answer, and it wasn't the one they had hoped to hear. "We need time to discuss this among our people," Nithara said finally. "This meeting is adjourned." As the Zephyrians filed out of the room, Sullivan wondered if humanity had just lost its chance at making alien friends. His crew had been honest about their capabilities, but honesty might have cost them everything. Captain Sullivan was eating breakfast in his quarters when the alarms began screaming throughout Peaceful Harbor Station. The sound was different from any human alarm he had ever heard. It was a soft, musical tone that somehow managed to convey pure terror. He rushed to the command center where he found Fleet Leader Vextal staring at a display screen with his 4 eyes wide with fear. The other Zephyrians in the room were moving frantically between stations, their usual calm completely gone. "What's happening?" Sullivan asked. "The Korvac Empire," Vextal said without looking away from the screen. "They have found us." Sullivan looked at the display and saw dozens of red dots moving toward their position. Military ships, heavily armed, and moving in attack formation. He had heard of the Korvac Empire during his briefings about this region of space. They were conquerors who took worlds by force and enslaved the populations. "How many ships?" Sullivan asked. 57, replied Science Commander Ithara, her musical voice shaking with fear. "They are demanding our immediate surrender. They want this station, our research data, and all civilian populations to be handed over for labor assignments." Sullivan felt his blood run cold. Labor assignments was a polite way of saying slavery. "What are your options?" "We have none," Vextal said quietly. "Our ships are not equipped for combat. We have 12 vessels at this station, but they are exploration and research ships. The Korvac have conquered 43 worlds in this sector. No one has ever successfully resisted them." "What do you usually do when they threaten you?" "We evacuate," Ithara admitted sadly. "We abandon our colonies and research stations and find new homes elsewhere. It is better than fighting a war we cannot win." Sullivan stared at the tactical display. The Korvac fleet was massive, but he could see weaknesses in their formation. They were flying in standard conquest patterns, expecting no real resistance. Their ships were spread out, probably to intimidate rather than for tactical efficiency. "How long do we have?" he asked. 6 hours until they reach weapons range, Vextal replied. "We are preparing to evacuate the civilian population, but we cannot save everyone in time. At least 3,000 beings will be captured." Sullivan made a decision that would change everything. "What if you didn't run?" Every Zephyrian in the command center turned to look at him. Their expressions showed confusion and fear. "We cannot fight them," Velta said. "Our weapons are mining tools and research equipment. Their ships are built for war." "But you're not alone," Sullivan said. "The Liberty is still here." The room went silent. Fleet Leader Vextal slowly shook his head. "Captain, your ship is brave, but it is only one vessel against 57. Even humans cannot overcome such odds." "Maybe not," Sullivan admitted, "but we can try. Those civilians you're talking about abandoning, they don't deserve to be slaves. Someone has to stand up to bullies like the Korvac." Communications Officer Brad Turner appeared in the doorway. "Captain, I've been monitoring Korvac battle chatter. They're not expecting any resistance. Their commander is treating this like a routine intimidation run." Sullivan turned back to Vextal. "Give me tactical data on their ships. Everything you know about Korvac military doctrine." "You are serious about this?" Ithara said, her voice filled with amazement. "You would fight 57 ships to protect people you barely know?" "That's what we do," Sullivan said simply. "We fight bullies." Dr. Patricia Wells entered the command center with several Zephyrian scientists. "Captain, we've been working on something. The Zephyrians have amazing technology for peaceful purposes. If we modify their mining equipment and research tools, we might be able to give this station some defensive capabilities." One of the Zephyrian scientists, a young male named Keftar, stepped forward nervously. "We have never used our technology for violence before, but if it could save lives, we are willing to help." Sullivan felt a spark of hope. "What kind of modifications are we talking about?" "Their asteroid mining lasers can be reconfigured as weapons," Patricia explained. "Their cargo transporters can move objects at high speed, maybe fast enough to damage enemy ships. And their research probes could work as missiles if we program them correctly." Fleet Leader Vextel looked horrified. You want to turn our peaceful tools into instruments of war? I want to turn your peaceful tools into instruments of protection, Sullivan corrected. There's a difference. Engineer Danny Rodriguez joined the group, carrying a datapad filled with technical information. Captain, I've been studying their shield technology. If we combine it with our tactical knowledge, we might be able to create defensive barriers that could protect the station. This is insane, Velta said. We are researchers and explorers, not soldiers. You don't have to be soldiers, Sullivan replied. You just have to be willing to defend your home. Navigator Amy Chen appeared with a star chart showing the local system. Captain, I've found something interesting. The Korvac are coming through the asteroid field in single-file formation. If we position the Liberty at the narrow passage between those two large asteroids, we can force them to come at us 1 or 2 ships at a time, instead of all at once. Sullivan studied the chart. It was a classic choke point strategy. That could work, but the Liberty would be completely exposed. We'd be taking on their entire fleet with no backup. You would have backup, Vexatal said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him in surprise. If you are willing to risk everything to protect our people, then perhaps it is time for us to learn how to fight. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Zephyrian engineers worked frantically to convert their peaceful technology into defensive weapons. Human crew members taught alien scientists basic military tactics and target identification. The station's research computers were reprogrammed to coordinate defensive systems. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster established a command post where he could coordinate the station's new weapons with the Liberty's attack. Commander Helen Price worked with Zephyrian pilots to develop basic combat maneuvers for their lightly armed research ships. I never thought I would see the day when Zephyrians prepared for war, Ithara said as she helped calibrate a converted mining laser. You're not preparing for war, Sullivan told her. You're preparing to defend your home. There's a big difference. As the Korvac fleet drew closer, long-range sensors picked up their communications. The enemy commander was already planning how to divide the captured population among his ships. He was discussing which research facilities to strip and which civilians would make the best workers. They talk about us like we are property to be collected, young Keftar said angrily. It was the first time Sullivan had seen a Zephyrian express real anger. That's what bullies do, Sullivan replied. They see other people as things to be used. But today they're going to learn that some things fight back. Fleet Leader Vextal approached Sullivan as the final preparations were completed. Captain, I must ask you something that has been troubling me. Why are you doing this? Your ship could escape easily. You could return to human space and be safe. Why risk your lives for strangers? Sullivan thought about the question for a moment. It was the same thing his crew had been asking themselves. Finally, he found the words to explain. Because if we don't fight them here, they'll just attack someone else tomorrow. Evil succeeds when good people do nothing. My crew and I swore an oath to protect innocent people wherever they are. Vexatal's 4 eyes blinked slowly. I am beginning to understand why humans build ships like yours. You carry weapons not because you love violence, but because you hate bullies more than you fear death. Now you're getting it, Sullivan said with a grim smile. The Korvac fleet was now only 2 hours away. In the command center, alarms began sounding again. But this time, the Zephyrians were not preparing to run. For the first time in their peaceful history, they were preparing to fight. The Korvac fleet appeared on the horizon like a storm cloud of metal and death. Captain Sullivan stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, positioned between 2 massive asteroids that formed a narrow passage into Zephyrian space. Behind him, Peaceful Harbor Station waited with its newly converted defensive weapons. 57 ships confirmed, reported Navigator Amy Chen. They're maintaining standard conquest formation. No signs they suspect any resistance. Communications. Officer Brad Turner looked up from his station. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the Korvac fleet commander. Put it on screen. The main display showed a large reptilian alien with scarred skin and cruel yellow eyes. This was Commander Scarix of the Korvac Empire, a being who had conquered more worlds than most species had even discovered. Unknown vessel. Scarex's voice was harsh and commanding. You are blocking our path to a rightful conquest. Move. Aside immediately or be destroyed with the rest of these weak prey. Sullivan stepped forward, his voice calm and steady. This is Captain Jake Sullivan of the human vessel Liberty. You have 30 seconds to reverse course and leave this system. Scarex stared at the screen for a moment, then threw back his head and laughed. The sound was like breaking glass. One small ship threatens the might of the Korvac Empire. What species are you, human? We have never heard of you. You're about to learn, Sullivan replied. The Korvac commander's expression turned serious. You have spirit? I will give you that. When we capture your ship, I will make you a commander in my fleet. Your crew can serve as warriors instead of slaves. Not interested, Sullivan said. You have 15 seconds left. Destroy them, Scarex ordered, and the transmission ended. The Korvac fleet began moving forward, but they had to come through the asteroid passage in groups of 2 or 3 ships. It was exactly what Sullivan had hoped for. All stations. Battle. Ready, Sullivan commanded. Throughout the Liberty, his crew prepared for the fight of their lives. In the station's command center, Fleet Leader Vextal watched the tactical display with amazement and terror. One human ship against an entire fleet, he whispered. Are they insane or incredibly brave? Both, I think, replied Science Commander Ithara as she operated the station's converted mining laser. The first 3 Korvac ships entered the passage, their weapons charging for what they expected to be an easy kill. Instead, they found themselves facing something they had never encountered before, a human warship in full combat mode. The Liberty opened fire with precision that shocked everyone watching. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster coordinated the weapon systems with deadly accuracy. Each shot was calculated and deliberate. The first Korvac ship lost its engines. The second lost its weapon systems. The third tried to retreat, but found its path blocked by disabled ships. Impossible! Scarex roared over the communication channel. How can one ship be so effective? We practice, Sullivan replied calmly. More Korvac ships tried to enter the passage, but the Liberty held its position. Engineer Danny Rodriguez kept the weapons and shields running at maximum efficiency while taking heavy damage. The ship shook with each enemy hit, but it continued fighting. On the station, the Zephyrians watched in amazement as the humans turned combat into an art form. Every movement was purposeful. Every shot had meaning. The crew worked together like parts of a single machine. Their tactical coordination is incredible, young Keftar said, as he helped target the station's defensive weapons. They communicate, without words. Each person knows exactly what the others will do. The battle continued for 20 minutes. The Liberty destroyed or disabled 12 Korvac ships, but it was taking heavy damage. Hull breaches appeared on multiple decks. The shields were failing. Captain, reported Chief Engineer Karen Brooks over the communication system, we can't take much more of this. Main power is down to 30%. Sullivan knew they were running out of time. The Korvac had figured out they could overwhelm the Liberty by sending more ships through the passage at once. Soon they would break through and the station would be defenseless. That was when the Zephyrians surprised everyone, including themselves. This is Fleet Leader Vextal to all Zephyrian vessels. His voice came over the communication channel. The humans are risking their lives to protect our people. It is time we learned what courage means. 12 Zephyrian research and exploration ships moved out from behind the station. They were not built for war, but they had been modified with the converted mining equipment and research tools. More importantly, they carried crews who had finally learned the difference between aggression and protection. The Korvac commander was stunned. The prey species is fighting back? This is impossible. They have never resisted before. What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. The Zephyrians had no military training, but they had something else. They were fighting for their homes and families. Guided by human tactical advice, they used their superior technology in ways they had never imagined. Ithara's ship used its cargo transporter to hurl asteroids at enemy vessels. Teleth's navigation computer calculated jump coordinates that placed his ship behind surprised Korvac attackers. Keftar's research probes, reprogrammed as missiles, struck with accuracy that amazed even the humans. The tide of battle began to turn. The Krorvak found themselves facing not just one determined human crew, but an entire species that had decided to fight for the first time in 2,000 years. "This is not possible," Skarek screamed as his ships took heavy losses. "They are researchers and explorers, not warriors." "Today they're both," Sullivan replied. The final moment came when Skarex's own command ship tried to break through the passage. The Liberty, badly damaged but still fighting, moved to intercept. The two ships exchanged devastating fire at close range. Just as the Liberty's shields finally failed, Vextal's ship appeared alongside the human vessel. The Zephyrian commander had never fired a weapon in anger before, but his modified mining laser struck the Krorvak command ship at exactly the right moment. Skarex's ship exploded in a ball of fire and metal. The remaining Krorvak fleet, seeing their commander destroyed and facing unexpected resistance from a species they had considered harmless, made a decision that would change the balance of power in this region of space. They retreated. "Let this be known throughout the galaxy," came a transmission from one of the fleeing Krorvak ships. "The Zephyrian system is protected by the Death World warriors called humans. Do not attack this place unless you wish to face the wrath of beings who make war into an art." In the aftermath of the battle, Captain Sullivan stood in the command center of Peaceful Harbor Station, surrounded by Zephyrian leaders who looked at him with new understanding. "We owe you a debt we can never repay," Fleet Leader Vextal said. "You risked everything to protect people you barely knew." "That's what friends do," Sullivan replied simply. Science Commander Ithara stepped forward. "We understand now why humans carry weapons among the stars. You are not the aggressors we feared. You are the protectors the galaxy needs." Council Leader Nathara, the elderly Zephyrian who had been most suspicious of humans, approached Sullivan, with tears in her 4 eyes. "We were wrong about your species. We thought violence was always evil. Today we learned that sometimes good people must fight to protect what matters." "Will you stay?" Vextal asked. "Will you help us learn how to defend ourselves?" Sullivan looked around at the aliens who had become allies and friends. "We'll stay as long as you need us. But remember, the best warriors are the ones who only fight when they have no other choice." As the Liberty took its position as the first human ship permanently stationed in Zephyrian space, word spread throughout the galaxy. The peaceful Zephyrians had found protectors in the humans, and the humans had found friends worth protecting. The age of cooperation between species who complemented each other's strengths had begun. The Zephyrians would continue to explore and discover and create. The humans would stand guard against those who would harm the innocent. And in the depths of space, predator species who had grown comfortable attacking the weak began to think twice. Somewhere out there, the Death World warriors were watching, and they had never learned how to ignore a cry for help.